Most people's relationship with money is built around a specific background fear, not necessarily a conscious fear, not the acute fear of an immediate financial crisis, but a quieter and more persistent one, the fear of what would happen if something went wrong, if the job disappeared, if the medical bill arrived, if the car needed replacing in the same month the roof needed fixing. This fear does not require being poor to be present. Research on financial anxiety has found it distributed across income levels in ways that surprise people when they first encounter the data, because the fear is not primarily about how much money a person has. It is about how protected they feel from the consequences of not having enough. That is a different thing, and it is the specific thing that Nordic financial culture has addressed in a way that most other cultures have not. Before we continue, if you'd consider subscribing, it only takes a few seconds and helps the channel out a lot. Now, let's get into it. The Nordic relationship with money is not primarily about wealth. Nordic countries are prosperous, but they are not the wealthiest countries on earth by per capita income. And the Nordic person's relationship with money does not resemble the relationship with money that extreme wealth produces, which tends to be its own specific kind of complicated. What it resembles is something quieter and more fundamental: the absence of the specific background fear described above. Not because Nordic people are financially reckless or indifferent to money, but because the structural conditions of Nordic life have addressed the specific scenarios that generate the fear most reliably. The job loss that in many countries means a rapid and terrifying financial deterioration produces, in Norway or Denmark, an unemployment benefit that replaces a significant portion of income for a meaningful period, while alternative employment is found. The medical catastrophe that in some systems produces life-altering debt is, in Nordic systems, simply a medical event that gets treated. The retirement anxiety that haunts the working lives of people who are not sure whether they are saving enough for a future they cannot predict does not have the same character in systems where the pension is collective and the contribution is automatic. What this produces in daily life is not prosperity in the conventional sense. It is the specific psychological state that researchers on financial well-being call security, which turns out to be distinct from wealth and to correlate more strongly with life satisfaction than income above a certain threshold. The OECD Better Life Index has found consistently that Nordic populations report among the highest scores in the world on measures of financial well-being, not because they earn the most, but because the gap between their current financial position and financial catastrophe is, for most of them, significantly wider than in comparable developed economies. The fear is smaller because the floor is higher, and the specific freedom that produces, the freedom from the monitoring, the calculating, the contingency planning for scenarios that feel actually possible, is something that most people in most countries carry in the background of every financial decision without quite naming what it is. What does this actually feel like in a daily life? The closest description is negative. It is the absence of something rather than the presence of something. The Nordic person buying groceries is not doing a quiet calculation about whether the purchase leaves enough buffer for an unexpected expense. The Nordic person who gets a check engine light on their car is annoyed rather than afraid. The Nordic parent sending a child to university is not performing a complex financial analysis of whether the family can manage the cost. These are not small absences. They are, accumulated across a life of daily decisions, the description of a fundamentally different relationship with the present moment. The person who is not managing financial fear has cognitive and emotional resources available that the person who is managing it does not, and those resources show up in everything from the quality of attention they bring to their work to the ease with which they are present in social situations that are not colored by background anxiety. There is a specific conversation that illustrates this difference more clearly than any abstract description can. Ask a Nordic person what they would do if they lost their job tomorrow, and the answer tends to be practical and relatively calm. File for unemployment benefit, update the resume, take a few weeks to think clearly about what comes next. Ask the same question to someone without that safety net, and the answer tends to activate a different part of the nervous system entirely. The scenarios that follow are not hypothetical disasters but actual possibilities, each with real financial consequences that have been quietly modeled and worried about at the back of the mind for years. The Nordic person is not braver or more stoic. They are simply answering from a different set of actual circumstances, and the calm is the product of those circumstances rather than of their character. The honest complication is that the Nordic financial security is not free and is not equally distributed. The tax rates that fund the systems producing the security are high by international standards, which means the security is collectively purchased through individual contributions, rather than individually accumulated through personal savings. Not every Nordic person experiences the system as equally generous. Immigrants navigating systems designed around continuous contribution histories, young people in expensive housing markets, people whose specific situations fall between the categories the welfare state was designed to serve. These are real exceptions to the general picture. The floor is higher in Nordic countries. It is not infinitely high, and not everyone stands on it equally. But the general picture is the general picture, and what it produces for most Nordic people, most of the time, is a relationship with money that is, in the most precise sense of the word, proportionate. Money matters. It determines choices and shapes possibilities, and is worth attending to. What it does not do, for most Nordic people most of the time, is generate the specific background dread that economic precarity produces, and that, once present, colors everything it touches. The Nordic person who earns a modest income and lives a modest life is not suppressing financial anxiety through discipline or philosophy. They are simply not very afraid, and not being very afraid, it turns out, is one of the most significant determinants of how a daily life actually feels to live. All the sources and data referenced in this video are listed in the description below. Sit with that for a moment. I'll see you in the next one.